The ball cracked off my racket, a sharp echo slicing through the humid Georgia air. I was alone on the court, or so I thought, sweat stinging my eyes as I chased the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Then I saw him, Caleb, my best friend, standing frozen at the court's edge, his silhouette cutting through the golden haze of late afternoon. I missed the next shot. The ball sailed wide, bouncing into the chain-link fence with a dull clang. My chest tightened, not from the game, but from the way his hazel eyes locked onto mine. Unreadable, like he'd caught me in a secret I hadn't even told myself. We'd known each other since we were kids, climbing oaks and sneaking beers behind his dad's garage. But something about this moment felt different, dangerous. Even. Elias, you playing solo out here like some kind of maniac? Caleb called, his voice carrying that familiar drawl. But there was an edge to it, a question he wasn't asking outright. He stepped onto the court, boots scuffing the faded green surface, his flannel shirt half untucked, like he'd just rolled out of a long shift at the auto shop. I forced a laugh, wiping my brow, but my pulse wouldn't slow. Just blowing off steam, I said, tossing the racket between my hands. What's up? Thought you were fixing that Chevy all day. Finished early. He shrugged, but his gaze didn't waver. Saw your car. Figured I'd see what's got you out here swinging like you're fighting for your life. I opened my mouth to brush it off, but the words caught. Caleb had this way of seeing through me. Always had. Growing up in Willow Creek, a town where everyone knew your business before you did. We'd been each other's shield, him against his dad's temper, me against the whispers about why I never dated. But lately, something had shifted. I'd catch him looking at me too long, or he'd linger when we brushed shoulders, and it stirred something I'd buried deep. Want to hit a few? I asked, nodding at the spare racket by the bench. Maybe moving would shake off the weight of his stare. He raised an eyebrow, a slow grin spreading across his face. You know I suck at this. Man, last time I tried, I nearly took out a squirrel. Then you owe me a chance to laugh. I shot back, tossing him the racket. He caught it, his fingers brushing mine for a split second, and I swear the air crackled. We started rallying, the ball arcing lazily between us. Caleb was terrible, swinging too hard or too late, cursing under his breath every time he missed. But he kept at it, his laugh booming across the court. And for a moment, it was just us, like old times. No expectations, no secrets, just Elias and Caleb, two kids from nowhere, making the world small enough to fit on a tennis court. Then it happened. He lunged for a low shot, stumbled, and went down hard on one knee, the racket clattering beside him. I froze, expecting him to laugh it off. But he didn't. He looked up at me, his face flushed, eyes wide with something raw, something that wasn't just pain. Elias, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I need to tell you something. My heart slammed against my ribs. The world narrowed to the space between us. The court, the town, everything else fading away. I dropped my racket, the thud echoing like a gunshot. What is it? I managed, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer right away. He just held my gaze, like he was searching for permission to break something open. And in that moment, I knew whatever he was about to say would change everything. The sun dipped lower, painting the court in shades of amber and shadow. Caleb pushed himself up, dusting off his jeans, but he didn't break eye contact. I've been thinking about this for a while, he said, his voice rough, like he was pulling the words from somewhere deep. About you. About us. I couldn't breathe. Us. The word hung there, heavy with possibility, terrifying and electric. Caleb was the guy who dated cheerleaders, who'd spent high school charming every girl in Willow Creek. He was my best friend, the one who'd punched Tommy Reed in 10th grade when he called me a fag. He was straight, wasn't he? Caleb, what are you? I started, but he cut me off, stepping closer. Too close. I could smell the grease on his hands, the faint cedar of his cologne. Don't make me say it yet, he said, almost pleading. Just let me figure this out. Okay. I don't even know what I'm feeling, but it's real. and it's messing me up. I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was crazy, but my throat was tight, and my hands were shaking. I'd spent years shoving down the way my heart raced when he slung an arm around me, the way I memorized the curve of his jaw when he wasn't looking. I told myself it was nothing, that I was nothing, just a gay kid in a small town, pining for someone who'd never see me that way. But now, here he was, unraveling everything I thought I knew. "Caleb," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't get to just say that and expect me to know what to do." "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair, his eyes wild. "I know it's not fair. I saw you out here, and I couldn't keep pretending it's nothing. I don't know what this is, Elias, but I can't stop thinking about you." The world tilted. I wanted to grab him, to shake him, to ask if he knew what he was doing to me. But I couldn't move. The tennis court, the place where I'd come to escape, had become a stage for something I wasn't ready for. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear I'd carried for years. He was scared, but he was here, and that meant something. "Let's get out of here," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." "Not here." He nodded, his shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "Yeah. Okay." We grabbed our stuff and left the court, the silence between us thick with unspoken questions. As we walked toward my beat-up Honda, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into something bigger than either of us could handle. Willow Creek wasn't kind to secrets, and whatever this was, it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. We drove to the old quarry, the only place in Willow Creek where the world felt big enough to hold what we were carrying. The gravel crunched under my tires as we parked near the edge, the water below glinting like shattered glass in the fading light. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, his hands fidgeting, the air between us heavy with words neither of us knew how to say. I cut the engine, and the silence was deafening. "So," I said, staring at the steering wheel like it could save me. "You gonna tell me what's going on in your head? Or are we just gonna sit here till the mosquitoes eat us alive?" He let out a shaky laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't even know where to start. Elias, this isn't me. Or at least, I didn't think it was." I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "What isn't you? Caleb, you're freaking me out. Just say it." He looked out at the quarry, his jaw tight. "I've been feeling things. For you. Things I don't get. Things that don't make sense. I've never thought about guys like that. But with you, it's different. It's been different for a while." My breath caught. I wanted to believe him, to let the words sink in. But fear clawed at me. What if this was just a phase? A fleeting confusion? What if he woke up tomorrow and decided he'd made a mistake? I'd spent so long protecting myself, building walls around the part of me that loved him in ways I could never say. And now he was tearing them down, brick by brick. "Caleb," I said, my voice low, "you don't just drop something like that on someone. Do you even know what you're saying? This isn't a game. Not for me." "I know it's not," he said, turning to me, his eyes fierce. "You think I'd be here if I wasn't sure? I've been driving myself crazy, trying to figure out why I can't stop thinking about you. Why I get jealous when you talk to other guys. He stopped, his voice breaking. "I'm scared. Okay. But I'm here." I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap between us, but I didn't trust myself. Instead, I leaned back, staring at the roof of the car. "I've been in love with you since we were 16, I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I never said anything because I thought it'd ruin everything. And now you're telling me, what? That you might feel something too." He went still, his breath hitching. "You've, what?" "Don't make me repeat it," I said, my face burning. "You heard me." "Elias," he whispered, and the way he said my name made my chest ache. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were you," I said, my voice raw. "The guy who had a new girlfriend every month, who everyone loved. I was just the weird kid who liked art and tennis and you. I didn't think you'd ever see me like that. He reached out, his hand hovering over mine before he pulled back, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I see you now, he said. I don't know what that means yet, but I do. The air felt too small, too fragile. I wanted to believe him, but Willow Creek wasn't a place for easy love stories, especially not for two guys like us. I'd seen what happened to people who didn't fit the mold. Whispers, glares, worse. And Caleb, with his big family and his reputation, had more to lose than I did. Let's take this slow, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to figure out what this is before anything else. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. Yeah, slow. I can do that. But as we drove back into town, the tension between us didn't fade. It grew, wrapping around us like a live wire, ready to spark at the slightest touch. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew one thing: there was no going back. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and awkward silences. We hung out like always, grabbing burgers at Millie's Diner, fixing up Caleb's old truck, but everything felt charged, like we were dancing around a truth too big to name. I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his eyes tracing the lines of my face, and it took everything in me not to close the distance between us. At the same time, Willow Creek started to feel smaller, suffocating. I'd always known I was different, but I kept it quiet, blending in as best I could. Now, with Caleb's confession hanging between us, I felt exposed, like the town could sense the shift. At the hardware store, Old Man Carter gave me a long look when I bought paint for my art project, his eyes narrowing like he knew something. At church, Caleb's mom kept asking why we seemed off. Paranoia, maybe, but it was enough to keep me on edge. One night, we ended up at the drive-in, the only place in town where you could sit in the dark and not feel like the world was watching. The movie was some action flick neither of us cared about, the sound crackling through the old speakers. Caleb leaned back in the truck bed, his arm brushing mine, and I felt at that pull, that need to be closer. Elias, he said, his voice soft in the dark. What happens if this is real? If we're... I turned to him, the glow of the screen lighting half his face. Then we deal with it, I said. Together. But you need to be sure, Caleb. Because if you're not, if you back out, it's not just you who gets hurt. He didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Then he reached out, his hand finding mine in the dark, his fingers curling around my own. It was the first time he'd touched me like that, deliberate and unafraid, and it felt like the world cracked open. I'm sure, he said, his voice steady. I don't know how to do this, but I'm sure. That touch, that moment in the truck bed, changed everything. Caleb's hand in mine was a promise, fragile but real, and it lit something inside me I couldn't extinguish. But Willow Creek wasn't a place for promises like ours, and the weight of that truth settled over us like a storm cloud. We started meeting in secret, stealing moments where we could. Late nights at the quarry, early mornings at the edge of town where the woods swallowed the sound of our voices. Every touch his hand on my shoulder, my fingers grazing his wrist, felt like a rebellion against the world we'd grown up in. But it wasn't just the town we were hiding from. It was ourselves, too, testing the edges of something neither of us fully understood. Caleb was trying. I could see it. He'd show up with a shy smile, asking questions about my art, about what it was like to know I was gay in a place like this. But there were moments when he'd pull back, his face clouding over, like he was wrestling with a part of himself he couldn't name. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but I was too afraid of breaking what we had. One afternoon, we were at my place, sprawled on the couch with a half-eaten pizza between us. My parents were out, the house quiet except for the hum of the AC. Caleb was flipping through one of my sketchbooks, his fingers lingering on a drawing of the tennis court, the lines bold and chaotic. You're good at this, he said, his voice soft. Why don't you show this stuff to people? I shrugged, my cheeks warm. It's just personal. People here don't get it. They'd probably think it's weird. He looked at me, his eyes serious. I get it. It's like you're putting your soul on the page. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just leaned closer, my shoulder brushing his. He didn't move away. Instead, he set the sketchbook down and turned to me, his hand resting on my knee. Elias, he said, his voice low. I want this. I want you. But I'm scared I'm going to mess it up. My heart stuttered. You won't, I said, even though I wasn't sure. We'll figure it out. He leaned in, hesitant at first, then bolder, his lips brushing mine. It was soft, tentative, but it set my blood on fire. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face. And for a moment, the world was just us, tangled together in the quiet of my living room. But the world has a way of intruding. The front door slammed open, and my sister, Lena, walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. We sprang apart, my face burning, Caleb's eyes wide with panic. Lena froze, her gaze darting between us, and I saw the realization hit her like a freight train. Elias, she said, her voice sharp. What the hell? Lena, it's not, I started, but she cut me off. Don't lie to me, she said, her eyes narrowing. I'm not stupid. Are you guys? Caleb stood, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face pale. I should go, he muttered, heading for the door. Caleb, wait, I called, but he was already gone, the screen door slamming behind him. I turned to Lena, my stomach churning. Please, don't say anything. Not yet. She crossed her arms, her expression softening just a fraction. I'm not going to rat you out, Elias. But you know this town. You know what happens if people find out. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I know. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lena's words echoed in my head, mingling with the memory of Caleb's kiss. I wanted to believe we could make this work, that we could carve out a space for ourselves. But Willow Creek wasn't built for us. The next morning, I found Caleb at the auto shop, his hands buried in the engine of a pickup, his face closed off. We need to talk, I said, leaning against the workbench. He didn't look up. Yeah, I know. Lena won't say anything, I said, trying to sound confident. But we need to be careful. If this gets out. I know, he said, his voice tight. I'm not stupid. Elias. I know what people will say. What my dad will say. I flinched. Caleb's dad was a hard man, quick with his fists and his judgment. If he found out about us, it wouldn't just be words. Then what do we do? I asked. You said you were sure. I am, he said, finally meeting my eyes. But it's not just about us. It's everyone else, too. I don't know if I'm ready for that. His words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to fight, to tell him we could face it together. But the fear in his eyes stopped me. Take your time, I said, even though it hurt. But don't shut me out. Okay. He nodded, but the distance between us felt wider than ever. As I left the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time, that the world was closing in. The next week was torture. Caleb and I kept our distance. Not because we wanted to, but because the weight of what we'd started was too heavy to carry in public. I threw myself into tennis, painting, anything to keep my mind off the ache in my chest. But every swing of the racket, every stroke of the brush, brought me back to Himto, the way his hand felt in mine, the way his voice cracked when he said he was scared. Then came the night of the town fair. Willow Creek's annual attempt to pretend it was more than a speck on the map, with its Ferris wheel and cotton candy stands. Caleb texted me to meet him there. A cryptic, "We need to talk," that set my nerves on edge. I found him by the ring toss, his hands stuffed in his jacket, his face lit by the flickering lights of the midway. You okay? I asked, keeping my voice low. The crowd buzzed around us. Kids screaming, couples laughing, but it felt like we were in our own bubble. He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. I've been thinking, he said. About what you said. About us figuring this out together. My heart lifted, but I stayed cautious. And I want to try, he said, his voice firm despite the shake in his hands. I don't know how, but I want to. I don't want to lose you, Elias. I swallowed hard, the noise of the fair fading to a hum. You're not going to lose me, I said. But we can't keep hiding forever. People are going to notice. I know, he said, stepping closer. But maybe we don't have to tell the whole world yet. Just let me get there. Okay. I nodded, my throat tight. Okay. He smiled. A small, real smile. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. We wandered the fair, sharing a bag of popcorn, stealing glances when no one was looking. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for that night, it was enough. But Willow Creek never lets you forget where you are. As we left the fair, laughing about a clown who'd nearly tripped over his own shoes, I saw Tommy Reed leaning against a truck, his eyes locked on us. Tommy, who'd never let go of his high school grudges, who'd always looked at me like I was something to be fixed. His smirk sent a chill down my spine. Caleb, I said quietly, nodding toward Tommy. He's watching. Caleb's face hardened. Let him watch, he said, but his voice was tight. He's got nothing on us. I wanted to believe him, but Tommy's stare followed us all the way to the parking lot. I knew that look. It wasn't just curiosity, it was trouble. The next day, the rumors started. Whispers at the diner. Sidelong glances at the gas station. Someone had seen us at the fair. Too close. Too comfortable. By the time I got to the tennis court, my phone was buzzing with texts from Lena, warning me to lay low. But I couldn't. Not when Caleb showed up. His face pale. His hands clenched. My dad heard something, he said, his voice low. He's asking questions. Said Tommy's been talking. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? Nothing, he said, but his eyes were wild. I can't. Elias. If he finds out, he'll. He didn't finish. But he didn't have to. I knew what his dad was capable of. Then we stop, I said, the words tasting like ash. We go back to being friends. Nothing else. Caleb's face crumpled. You don't mean that. I do. I lied. My chest aching. I can't be the reason you lose everything. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. You're not. Elias. You're the only thing that makes sense right now. I wanted to believe him, but the fear in his eyes mirrored my own. We were standing on the edge of something we couldn't control, and Willow Creek was waiting to push us over. The rumors spread like wildfire, licking at the edges of our lives. By the end of the week, I couldn't walk into Millie's diner without heads turning, whispers trailing me like shadows. Caleb stopped coming to the tennis court, and his texts grew shorter, clipped. I told myself it was temporary, that he just needed space. But every unanswered message felt like a knife. I threw myself into painting, locking myself in my room with canvases and colors, trying to pour the chaos inside me onto something I could control. But every stroke was Caleb's eyes, his hands, the way he'd looked at me that night at the fair. I was losing him, and I didn't know how to stop it. Then, one night, he showed up at my door, his face bruised, his eyes red. Caleb, I gasped, pulling him inside. What happened? My dad, he said, his voice hoarse. He heard more. Tommy's been running his mouth. Dad, he didn't take it well. I felt sick, my hands hovering over the bruise on his cheek. Did he hit you? Caleb nodded, looking away. He thinks we're. He couldn't finish. But the words hung there, heavy and sharp. I pulled him to the couch, my heart racing. You don't have to go back there, I said. Stay here. My parents won't care. He shook his head. I can't just run. Elias. He's my dad. And this town, they'll never let this go. Then we leave, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. We get out of Willow Creek. Start over somewhere else. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. You do that? For me? For us? I said, my voice fierce. I'm not losing you. Caleb. Not to this town. Not to your dad. Not to anyone. He didn't say anything. Just leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine. I could feel his breath, warm and uneven. And for the first time in days, I felt like we were in this together. The next morning, we made a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. We'd save up, find a city where we could blend in, maybe Atlanta, maybe somewhere farther. I had some money from odd jobs, and Caleb could pick up extra shifts at the shop. It felt like a lifeline, a way to hold on to what we had. But Willow Creek wasn't done with us. That afternoon, I was at the tennis court, trying to clear my head, when Tommy Reed and a couple of his buddies showed up. I knew trouble when I saw it, but I didn't back down. Got something to say? Tommy? I asked, gripping my racket. He smirked, stepping closer. Just wondering what's going on with you and your boyfriend. Whole town's talking. Mind your own business, I said, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my gut. He laughed, but it was cold, cruel. You think you can just do whatever you want. This ain't that kind of town, Elias. Before I could respond, Caleb appeared, his truck screeching to a stop behind us. He jumped out, his face dark with anger. Back off, Tommy, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Tommy turned, his smirk widening. Oh, look, it's the other half. You two make a cute couple. Caleb lunged, and I barely grabbed him in time, pulling him back. He's not worth it, I hissed, my hands on his chest. Let's go. Tommy laughed as we walked away, but I could feel Caleb shaking under my hands. This is what I was afraid of, he muttered. This is why I can't. Don't, I said, my voice sharp. Don't let them win. We're stronger than this. He looked at me, his eyes full of doubt, but he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. We didn't talk about Tommy, but his shadow hung over us. Caleb started working double shifts, saving every penny, while I took on freelance art gigs, sketching logos for local businesses. Every dollar was a step toward freedom, but it felt like we were racing against time. The town's whispers grew louder, and I could see the toll it was taking on Caleb, his shoulders hunched, his smiles rare. One night, we met at the quarry again, the stars bright above us. We sat on the hood of my car, sharing a warm beer, the silence between us comfortable for the first time in weeks. I've been thinking, Caleb said, his voice soft. About what you said. About leaving. I turned to him, my heart pounding. And I want to, he said, his eyes meeting mine. I want to go with you, Elias. I want us. I reached for his hand, my fingers threading through his. Then we do it, I said. We make it work. He leaned in, kissing me, and this time it wasn't tentative. It was fierce, desperate, like he was pouring everything he felt into that one moment. I kissed him back, my hands in his hair, and for the first time, I let myself believe we could make it. But the next day, everything fell apart. I was at the diner when Lena called. Her voice panicked. Elias, you need to get to the shop. Now. I ran the whole way, my heart in my throat. When I got there, I saw Caleb's truck. The driver's side door dented. The windshield cracked. He was sitting on the curb, his head in his hands, blood trickling from a cut on his lip. Caleb, I said, dropping to my knees beside him. What happened? He looked up, his eyes hollow. My dad, he said. He found out. He trashed my truck. Said I'm not his son anymore. I felt like I'd been punched. Caleb, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, his voice breaking. It's not your fault. I told him. I told him about us. I couldn't keep lying. I pulled him into my arms, not caring who saw. He clung to me, his body shaking, and I knew we couldn't stay in Willow Creek any longer. Not like this. We're leaving, I said, my voice firm. Tonight. We'll figure it out. He nodded, his face pressed against my shoulder. Okay, he whispered. Okay. We packed what we could, stuffing clothes and cash into duffel bags. My parents were confused but supportive, Lena promising to cover for us. As we drove out of town, the lights of Willow Creek fading in the rear view, I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. We were leaving everything behind, but we were doing it together. Atlanta was our first stop, a city big enough to swallow us whole. We found a cheap motel, splitting the cost, and spent the night planning our next move. Caleb was quiet, still reeling from his dad's rejection, but he held my hand, his grip tight. We're going to be okay, I said, lying next to him in the dark. He turned to me, his eyes soft. I know, he said, as long as I've got you. Atlanta was loud, chaotic, a world away from Willow Creek. We found a tiny apartment in Midtown, barely big enough for the two of us, but it was ours. Caleb got a job at a garage, his hands always stained with grease, while I picked up freelance art gigs, my sketches starting to gain traction online. It wasn't easy, money was tight, and the city was overwhelming, but every night, when we collapsed onto our secondhand couch, I felt like we were building something real. Caleb was different here, freer. He'd laugh louder, touch me without looking over his shoulder. But the scars from Willow Creek lingered. Some nights, he'd wake up shaking, haunted by his dad's words, and I'd hold him until he fell back asleep. I carried my own ghost fear that he'd change his mind, that this was too much for him. But he never did. Every day, he chose me, and I chose him. One evening, we went to a local art show, my first time displaying my work in public. I was nervous, my hands sweating as strangers looked at my paintings. But Caleb was there, his arm around my shoulders, whispering encouragement. One of my PCs, a vibrant, abstract take on the tennis court where it all began, sold to a gallery owner. And I nearly cried when she handed me the check. You did it, Caleb said, pulling me close as we left the gallery. I'm so proud of you. I looked at him, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, and felt a surge of love so strong it scared me. We did it, I said. We got out. We're here. He smiled, his hand finding mine. Yeah, he said. We are. Months later, we got a letter from Lena. Things in Willow Creek had calmed down, but Caleb's dad hadn't reached out. It hurt him, I could tell, but he was learning to let go. We were building a life, piece by piece, and it was messy and hard and beautiful. One night, we went back to a tennis court, not the one in Willow Creek, but a new one, tucked away in a city park. We didn't play, just sat on the bench, sharing a bottle of soda, the stars bright above us. Remember that day? Caleb asked, his voice soft. When I walked onto the court and everything changed. I laughed, leaning against him. How could I forget? You looked like you were about to confess to a crime. He chuckled, his arm wrapping around me. I was scared out of my mind. But I'm not anymore. I turned to him, my heart full. No regrets. He shook his head, his eyes steady. None. You're my home, Elias. I kissed him, right there under the stars, and it felt like a promise, one we'd keep. No matter what. We'd left Willow Creek behind, but we'd carried the best parts of ourselves with us. And as we sat there, the court quiet around us, I knew we'd found something worth fighting for. Love isn't easy, especially when the world tries to tear it apart. But we'd face the whispers, the bruises, the fear, and we'd come out stronger. Caleb and I, two kids from nowhere, had dropped everything to build something new. And it was enough. It was everything.